Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second webinar in our Science Pathways series focused on neuroscience. My name is Zainab Majid, and I'm the head of the Logistics Committee at the Auxi project. This event is a collaboration between the Auxi project, an organization focused on offering academic support to students and connecting youth with opportunities to help them excel in post-secondary and beyond, and Major Workshop, a student-run organization dedicated to helping youth discover their passion and decide on a major after high school. I'm pleased to welcome our speakers today, Maya Koblanski and Kimia Nouhi. Maya graduated in 2021 from the University of British Columbia with a behavioral neuroscience degree. She has conducted 3 years of neuroscience research, including publications and presenting at Harvard, giving biochemistry lectures as a TA, and has other exciting experiences to share with you. Kimia is a second-year behavioral neuroscience student who is passionate about community service and volunteer work and research in neuroscience and medicine. In one of her labs, she is currently studying vulnerable populations struggling with addictions and concurrent disorders. Her ultimate goal is to pursue medicine and promote accessibility of physical and mental health for everyone. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to drop any questions you might have in the chat to be addressed by our speakers. This webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our website, YouTube, and Instagram. With that, I'll hand it over to our speakers to introduce themselves further, beginning with Maya.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maya Koblanski. I'm just introduced, a recent graduate of UBC's Neuroscience program. And with that, I was a recipient of the Top Neuroscience Student Award at UBC and other various leadership scholarships. But I've had an amazing experience of just going through UBC, but there's also a lot that I wish I knew when I was in grade 12. And with that, I'm just really excited to have a discussion with you all today. And you can also feel free to reach out with me after this meeting, and I'd be super open to offering one-on-one mentorship.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimia, and right now I'm in my second year of behavioral neuroscience. The program itself is not that specific just yet. In third year, I'm going to do more specific like psych courses. Like Maya, there are a lot of things I wish I knew in my first year before applying to the behavioral neuroscience program. And I'm going to share that with you guys today. So if you have any questions, you can also email me. But other than that, I'm really excited to talk with you all.
Okay, guys, thanks for the introduction. So first, let's start off with the questions from all of our followers that we put on a question sticker earlier on. And the first question is pretty simple. So why did you decide to go to UBC? And was there something special about the university? And I think, can we start with the younger one, Kimia?
Yeah, sure. The main reason I decided to go to UBC is because I graduated high school in Vancouver, and COVID hit like right in the middle, and I wasn't really ready to move out, and I wanted to stay within BC. The other reason is I had a lot of family members who went to UBC, and I knew that school had good reputation. And as well, I always knew that I wanted to pursue medicine. And so UBC Med was kind of like my top goal. And I was like, why not do my undergrad there to get more familiar with the school? Another reason is UBC has lots of research going on, and that is also something I was really interested in. And so that's why I chose to go there. But the top reason I would say is I wasn't really ready to move out and like go out there. So, and my first year was online. So it really made it like I would say an easy transition. And then my second year being in person, it really helped me like not feel that much of a gap, like being far from my high school friends, from my family. And overall, I don't really regret my decision. And I'm happy that I chose UBC.
So how about you, Maya?
Yeah, so there's a lot of similar reasons to Kimia, so that was really interesting to hear. I started at UBC in 2017, and again, a big reason was I wanted to be able to remain close to my family network. Although I was living on campus, it was nice to not be so separated. course, when I look back on it now as a graduate, I'm confident that I would be able to deal with being away from my family. So if anyone's thinking of going to school in another province, it's also an excellent opportunity if it feels right to you. Of course, some other reasons were my dad went to UBC, so I was quite familiar with the campus. I used to play soccer out there, so I was familiar with it, knew it was beautiful. We have a beach right beside the school that I would walk down to whenever I'm a bit stressed out. And again, ranking and like research opportunities that UBC has. I was introduced to neuroscience by a UBC neuroscience PhD who was my teacher in grade 10. And that was kind of how I got introduced to research. So right then I knew UBC had excellent opportunities in research. Of course, that's not to say that schools across Canada don't have the same. Another reason I would say connected with being close to my family was I really wanted to be pursuing research during the summer. And I also want to be with my family in the summer, and it wasn't so financially wise for me to be living away during those times where I could be making money. So UBC was a great balance for that. And overall, I'm super happy to have gone to UBC, and I hope to pursue medicine there as well.
Yeah, definitely. Not having to pay rent in these kind of situations is definitely a plus. And yeah, myself, I've toured UBC, and I can confirm with all the speakers here, the scenery is absolutely stunning. The campus is beautiful. So yeah. So what are your favorite topics within neuroscience? Let's start with Maya.
Thank you so much for this question. So my favorite topic is also the topic that I've done 3 years of basic research in, specifically biological sex differences in the stress response. I was introduced to this in grade 10 with my student teacher, who I would talk to after every class. And he told me, there's differences in the brain. And I was just blown away right away and was thinking of how that can impact various medical treatments. And in my first year of UBC, I decided to take a deep dive into that by signing up for a lab. And just like looking at the stress response and how male and female rats kind of respond to stress, we were actually able to find a differential pathway that also explains how sometimes men biologically born as males and women respond differently to mood disorder drugs. And that has great possibilities to impact future mood disorder drug treatment to make sure that it's personalized for the person taking the medication.
And how about you, Kimia?
Yeah, so for me, I would say probably my response will change after next year because in third year we take more specific courses. But as of now, I'm really interested in like emotion and cognition, and basically the brain response to I guess this kind of like stems from the lab I work at, and we look at kind of the intersection of like physiology and psychology. So like we look at fMRI studies or shock response. So it's really interesting to look at like the brain, different people's brain responses to different stimuli. So I find that really interesting. Another thing I would say I'm super interested in is infant psychology and developmental. I think that's also going to be one of my top courses that I'm planning to take next year. Other than that, I would say just the response of the nervous system and the brain to different drugs and how basically your brain circuits change in response to different drugs and how addiction occurs. That's also really an interesting circuit to look at. But other than that, I would say every single topic in psychology is interesting and it's worth trying, definitely.
Yeah, lots of interesting topics because, well, there are endless possibilities in neuroscience, right? So it's a bit of an extension on the previous questions, but can you envision your neuroscience research focus into a clinical setting in reality? So I think for Maya, I would be focusing on stress response and difference between male and female, and of course for Kimia would be emotion and cognition, drugs, addiction behaviors, etc. Right? So let's start with Maya. Can you think, envision it to a reality?
Thank you so much for this question. I could see definitely several clinical possible innovations that could come from this research, specifically with the sex differences, kind of looking at the serotonin system and kind of different pathways in the brain. A key part of my research is really calling out the question how in neuroscience, unfortunately, in the past, most studies for different pharmaceuticals were done using only male subjects, like male rats, without acknowledging others' sex differences. So with my research actually looking into how the brain differentially responds to stress has great possibility in terms of personalized medicine. For example, with SSRI antidepressants, making sure that they're designed for the person who is using the drugs. Unfortunately, at the moment, in some ways, considering most studies were done using only male subjects, the drugs are optimized for the male brain. And I'm really motivated to hopefully just initiate change in that regard and continue that hopefully as a medical doctor one day.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised by hearing that as well. I'm not sure why psychologists didn't test the female counterparts because it makes up 50% of the population. So yeah, this will be interesting. And Kimia, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I guess with the motivated cognition lab, I wouldn't say it really translates to a clinical setting. However, with the addictions and concurrent lab, I would say that so currently we work with homeless people, the homeless population in Vancouver, and we work to basically like study what kind of things they're addicted to and how we can help and support them. And so we do we take surveys from them, we interview them to see the conditions in which they live in. And so that would probably translate to a clinical setting because we also study other drugs that are used in other countries, which are illegal in Canada, and they're being used here. So we're working to like prevent that use and replace it with other I can't really share that much info because it's like a current study being done, but yeah, basically we're really trying to help the homeless population in Vancouver, and I would see it being potentially useful in the long term in terms of helping with addiction and other disorders. For example, other side effects that these drugs result in, such as depression, anxiety, so many things that like lots of like youth and teenagers also struggle with, not only like the older population. So for sure, I do see a like bright future for this field as well.
Exactly, and I think that being able to help homeless people and I think everyone with addiction behavior is so clinical because the government is struggling with it. There's no perfect solution to it, and I think right now we can only believe in science and not throwing money at them, right? So we will move on with Zainab, and these are 4 questions that are personalized to your study.
So thank you to both of you for such insightful responses. So now we'll move on to more personalized questions, starting with Maya. Were you in an internship or a co-op program? If yes, did it meet your initial expectations of the job before you actually did it?
Thank you so much for the question. So yes, I was involved in internships during my time at UBC, specifically doing research with the UBC Faculty of Medicine for 3 years. And I was also asked to be a TA in biochemistry. I'll be speaking more though here about my experience in research. Got involved just out of first year, and my expectations for research at the time, I didn't really realize there was such, I guess, a human and kind of personable aspect of research. I always thought of it as more robotic. Do do the experiments, etc. But there's a whole camaraderie, and some of my best friends are from my lab. So there's a major human aspect of research, but I've also really gained an appreciation for how much work goes into those papers that you find online. Of course, we have everything nice and consolidated, but like 10 years can go into that. Multiple trial and error, the brain surgeries didn't work, etc. And you have to be resilient and then just really be open to that with the main goal of making an impact, for example, in the clinical world. But considering not everything works out, I've also become really open, and I really appreciate the power of null results, considering sometimes not seeing a difference. That's also really important information. And I really wish that the scientific community was more open to that. It's always about, did you find statistical significance? But there's also use in not finding statistical significance. That's kind of what was different than what I expected. Would you like more details into kind of how I got involved in the internship, or is that for a different question?
I think that's good for now. We can come back to it.
Sounds good.
Thank you for your response. So now for Maya, for Kimia. Mental health is one of your research topics. So can you reveal some tips for high school students like us on things such as anxiety and stress around like exam season?
For sure. So one thing that I will share with you guys that to this day, I sometimes even forget is taking breaks. I'm one of those people that thinks of taking, like I used to think of taking breaks like such a waste of time, or I would feel guilty if I'm going out with my friends or taking a walk. I would always think of it as if, oh, I'm losing out on study time, or I'm not using my time wisely. This time that I'm spending being outside probably could be used studying or catching up in some of my classes. But what I didn't realize at the time was that the time that I spend outside of my studying is actually giving my brain a chance to refresh and get renewed. And even if it's just 15 or 30 minutes, it really does have a big impact. So let's say one day I study back to back from like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. After 5 p.m., I can't really focus anymore. However, on a day that I'm starting at 9 a.m., but at 11 a.m., I'm taking a break, then at 2 p.m., I'm taking another break, I can actually go on longer to like 9 p.m. to study. So that is something I would definitely recommend, like taking breaks. And by taking breaks, it can be anything you want. It can be like 15 minutes of an episode you want to watch, or going outside for a walk. I know with Vancouver weather, it's not always possible. It's like, it might be raining, but like just going out of your room, like having a conversation with your parents, FaceTiming your friends, anything that you find rewarding, because that 15 minutes really, really has like a big exponential impact on the rest of your day. Other than that, so right now I'm taking like a stress strategies and wellness course, and other things I have learned to be very effective are methods such as meditation. So I don't know if you guys are into yoga or anything, but some strategies that are really helpful are guided meditation. For example, I find that if I've been working all day or have an exam coming up, it's really hard for me to like not overthink, and that causes me to not be able to sleep well at night. So listening to like guided meditations or just some peaceful music before bed also really helps me. And ever since I've gotten into those kind of strategies, I find that my second year has gone much better than my first year did. Even though first year was like, online, I was at home. Technically, I had like more free time. I was much more stressed and worried about how my grades were going to turn out. But ever since I started like kind of, treating myself, giving myself more breaks, my brain has been more refreshed, and I feel that I have more potential to get more work done. So definitely don't feel guilty if you're spending time outside of your studies. if anything, that's actually helping you get more done in the long term.
That's really good advice. I'm gonna have to use that because I have midterms coming up. So yeah, back to Maya. Obviously, Harvard presentations are a huge deal. Can you tell us the journey of how you got there?
Sure, thank you so much for the question. I'll first just touch a bit upon how I got into research and then how I got into giving these presentations. With research, it was first year, and UBC has these really awesome online programs for getting into research and getting paid for the work, which was excellent for me. And I was in first year, I hadn't had official research experience yet, but you'll see that this is a common theme also with the presentations. I decided to just apply because there's nothing to lose here. Then I got an interview offer. I was like, what? So I did that. And I would say some highlights of the interview were not selling myself short, even though I didn't have official research experience yet. I touched upon what I learned in my chemistry labs in university. And I talked about all the labs I did in IB biology and chemistry. So I made sure to really sell myself there and really believe in myself and had this go-getter attitude. And this went in the paid research after first year and just continue doing all of my lab work, working with rats, helping with neurosurgeries, all sorts of things. And that work just culminates. And once you have work that you can present, what it comes down to is you look up local presentations, and again, you just apply. I felt weird about it because I was an undergraduate and I knew the first conference I presented at was Genome BC, and it was all grad students. I'd be the only undergrad, but I just applied. They let me in. I presented there, and you keep getting your foot in the door. And this is how you get those opportunities, and those stack up. And then, as my professor always said, once you get that NSERC research award, they just keep coming at you. So I just kept applying to present at different places. And all of a sudden I saw that Harvard had a conference, and okay, I'll apply. Let's see what happens. And they say, yes, come apply. Come present. And it was an absolutely amazing experience. And I ended up scoring 96 out of 100. I was just so excited, and I love the work that I do. And that's what happens when you just keep putting yourself out there. I imagine myself in high school. I don't know if I would have been able to imagine myself, being where I am now, but it's just about you put yourself into the situations where you feel a bit uncomfortable, but there's not much to lose. And inevitably, some things work out. And yeah, that's how I got into giving presentations. Thank you so much for the question.
That's really inspiring. Thank you. And now for Kimia, what is your plan after graduating?
So I would say my plan really depends on the kind of grades I'm going to get in the next few years. However, other activities also matter in terms of applying to like grad school or medical school. So for now, medicine has been something that I've wanted to do since I was probably in grade 5. I was really just exposed to it at a young age. My family has really struggled with like medical issues, cancer, brain surgeries, heart surgeries. So it's been something that I was like constantly exposed to and affected by. And I've lost a bunch of loved ones to it. And I've always like felt so helpless, in those situations. But that really didn't stop me or demotivate me from going into the field, even though the truth is there are so many, there are not a lot of answers in medicine. There are a bunch of diseases that we don't know where they come from. We don't know how to cure them. So that kind of served as kind of like a motivation for me to pursue the field. And I found that studying neuroscience also gives me other options. For example, a bunch of students go into law, a bunch of students go into a master's program, then to a PhD program. And for me, I know that I have a lot of options. I would say that my top still remains medicine. However, if not, I'm completely okay with doing a master's program, in neuroscience or even taking a gap year to reapply, study for the MCAT again. So for me, I'm not really in a rush to get into medicine because I know my end goal, and the journey doesn't look the same for everyone. A bunch of people apply after their second or third year and don't even finish their bachelor's and get in. However, for me, I know that neuroscience is something that I want to complete, and because I've invested in my degree and it's something that I really want to know more of. So I definitely want to graduate from neuroscience before I pursue anything else. So I'm not really in a rush. However, I'm also open into, that's why I pursued research in my undergrad, because I want to see if I would enjoy doing a master's or a PhD program. And neuroscience also has a bright future in terms of research, in terms of opportunities. And it's also really flexible. So it's not only like you study about the brain and that's it. So, there are other topics such as health psychology, stress, like so many things, just like sociology, all intersect with neuroscience. And that's what I really like about this field. So overall, I would say medicine is my top goal, but I'm okay with doing other things along the way that all will help me grow as a person. And that's what medicine really is. They really want you to be a well-rounded person and have tried so many things to get to the goal that you want. To make sure if you really want it, because you never want to go into medical school and be like, oh, I wish I really tried this other thing and now I'm not really sure of where I am. They really want you to be sure of your position if you are a medical student. So I'm okay with like pursuing everything that there is out there and really be sure of my decision.
That's a really good answer. It's good that like you have multiple options laid out for you. And thank you to both of you for your individual responses. And now we'll go back to Nam for asking some more questions.
Yeah, so I think Kimia, like big props for you taking on the challenge for medicine after what has happened. And so for now, what is, I think everyone as a high school student think of neuroscience as a pathway to go into medicine. And of course, they think that the workload is pretty bad, pretty horrible. So what is it like in neuroscience for you guys? And are you involved in any extracurriculars? And how do you manage your time with school and extracurricular and, maybe a bit on the financial side as well? So let's go with Kimia first.
For sure. So to start off, I initially began getting interested in neuroscience and psychology when I was in grade 12, where I took AP Psychology. And I would say that course really, really changed my view towards life. And that was because I had a teacher who was very inspiring, and I felt very connected to her the way she was teaching. I would learn things just right in class. I would spend a lot of my time on AP Psychology outside of class. And I don't really like reading textbooks. I like learning in person or like watching videos. But for that class, I would spend so much time reading textbooks and just, diving so much deeper into the topics than I was expected to. And so when I went into UBC, I can tell you guys like my top choices. So in your first year, I think in your second term, you will have the option to choose between 3 different programs in your second year that you want to do. And for me, my top choices were behavioral neuroscience. I believe the other one was so that's more of like a cellular, anatomical, physiological side of things. And the other one was integrative sciences, where if I didn't get into my top choices, I would integrate physiology and neuroscience. So I always knew neuroscience was something I wanted to do. So even if I got into another program, I would definitely get a minor in neuroscience. Now, for the workload, so in UBC, how it works is you get in based on the average you get in your first year. And the average to get into the neuroscience program is considered to be relatively medium to high. It's definitely not one of the highest because the highest ones are for pharmacology and CAPS, I believe. And those are in the 90s, 95, at least from this year. And for neuroscience, I think the minimum this year was about 85 and up. So it is considered a competitive program. And from that, you can already tell if they want you to have a certain average in your first year, they kind of expect you to keep that up. And the reason why these like averages are made is because they want to know if you're really made for the program. Are you going to survive in the second and third year? And the workload is, so in my first year, the workload was a lot. And that was probably because I was new to university and I didn't really know how to manage. This year is, I would say it's more, but I've learned to manage it better and I've learned to study more efficiently rather than studying for longer. And in terms of neuroscience courses, it's so first term of second year, I had 2 neuroscience specific courses. However, only one of them was, Introduction to Behavioral Neuroscience, and the other one was a statistics course that you need to take in order to go into third year. And now that I'm in my second term of second year, it's also another behavioral neuroscience stats course. So this is something that I was not aware of when I applied to the behavioral neuroscience program. I didn't know that I need to do 2 terms of stats. And I am good at math, but I don't enjoy doing math. And that's why I pursued neuroscience and not something like a math degree or a physics degree. And so after taking that first stats class, it really, I would say I worked the hardest between all my other courses in that class. And it really was a wake-up call for me to always research the program before I go into it, because I just saw the word, psych course. And I was like, oh, it's probably another neuroscience, brain-related course. And so that is something I want you guys to know. If you're deciding to go into UBC neuroscience, you need to be able to get really good at stats. And now that I've done so much of stats, it makes sense to me because you're applying it every day in your lab, in writing research papers, in understanding other people's research papers. And if you really don't have stats knowledge, I would say that you won't be able to understand at least 99 or 100% of the contents of the paper. So that is something, a skill that I wish I developed sooner. And so my workload was crazy because of stats. Now this term, it's much better because I've learned how to study for such classes. So it's less of memorizing and more of applying. And long story short, to put it into comparison between high school, my workload is definitely, even though I'm taking 5 courses, and high school I used to take 8 courses, my workload is more because the time that we're finishing the content is much less. So we're expected to finish everything in 3 months and take a final exam. And in high school, we had the entire year to do a course and the exams weren't so back to back. So workload is definitely crazy. And how I manage that is, again, by taking breaks, by keeping a schedule. And I don't only study or go to UBC, I do other things. For example, I volunteer for my local hospital. We have this youth advisory committee that we raise money to get MRI machines for the hospital and other medical equipments. So that is something that I'm committed to every week. I also work at a pool, I lifeguard and teach swimming lessons. So I also need to manage that. And every week I go to the pool. Other than that, I go into my 2 labs. We have lab meetings. We have participants coming in that I need to test. And it's definitely a lot to manage. And I also have clubs that I'm involved in. For example, I'm involved in the Neuroscience Club, our research club. So I would say I'm one of those people that kind of overcommits myself and takes too much. And that is something I've been doing since I was in grade 10, 11, 12. And I'm kind of used to like heavy workload. And I kind of like that because I find that if I don't have too much on my plate, I either procrastinate or go and do unproductive things. So when I know that I have a meeting later on in the day, it makes me be more productive earlier in the day because I know I won't have the time to do that later. So not that I really like, really overcommitting myself, and which can lead to burnout, but I like having a schedule and I like having a plan for every day. And so with that, I would say I'm more on like the crazy side of things where I have a lot going on, but I also enjoy it. And in times where I feel really burned out, there has been times that I've had to like put club commitments aside and tell people that I have too much going on right now. I can't really show up to the meetings. So that is also a possibility that can happen. However, if you're used to having a busy schedule, it's nothing you cannot manage. And I would say you can always learn. University is a place that you can learn and grow constantly, and you're allowed to make mistakes. I made so many mistakes in my first year taking courses, getting such bad grades. But in my second year, instead of kind of blaming myself, I try to learn from those mistakes and became more organized. And I would say like kind of my best friend in these situations with staying organized and managing all the things that I have going on at once is keeping a calendar, keeping an agenda, setting reminders on my phone, setting alarms. And that has really helped me. So organizational skills is like the top thing in terms of due dates. In university, they're like much more strict. So they take marks off for every day you're late, like 10%. So by the fifth day, there really is no point. So really try to stay organized. And the other thing is like know yourself. So for me, I know that I like doing many things to kind of take a break from academics. But for you, it might just be that you like taking 3 courses and volunteering at one place. So really try to get to know yourself and don't push yourself. So if you think that in one too much going on, for the next term, maybe put one of them aside, because what matters at the end is you and your mental health. And you don't want to really sacrifice that in order to make up a good resume or like look outstanding in terms of like applying to jobs or commit with your other classmates. And so learning is a big thing and staying organized.
Absolutely. Thanks. I think that sums up quite a lot of questions that audiences have. So how about you, Maya? I think it makes it quite a difference since you just graduated.
Yeah, so in terms of the UBC Behavioral Neuroscience workload, I'm in the unique position to give you all years of how it kind of goes. First year is basically general science, and the biggest jump there, of course, is just how university works and realizing that you need new study skills. I remember my first math quiz, and I knew I would always hear from different mentors you need to have new study skills, but it didn't really hit until I just kind of looked over my notes more passively, then went into the quiz and didn't have quite the result that I wanted. And at that point, really important to be revamping your study skills. And if you can do that, your undergraduate degree can go like amazingly. So revamping study skills first year, the workload was okay. I took 4 courses in my first semester just to edge into it because I had IB credits. And then next semester, I took a full course load. And a key thing here about taking full course loads is that some grad schools and medical schools, they look at if you're taking a full course load, an honors program. So that's really important to keep into consideration. The hardest year is, I personally found, the year that you, Kimia, are in right now. It was just like a lot because there's a greater workload in second year. And a big thing is some of the courses still, because you're still at like the introductory level in neuroscience, you might not be super passionate about them. For example, those 2 stats classes, I'm good at math, but it was just, I don't know why they needed it to be in 2 classes. I felt like it could have been 1 math class kind of thing. So you're taking some courses that you might not be 100% passionate about. And for me, I really feel passion translates into performance and also like your mental health. So second year, I would say, was most difficult. After that, absolutely amazing. I absolutely love the behavioral neuroscience program at UBC. You have a lot of room to personalize your degree. Now they actually have streams where you can do like a cellular stream or more cognitive neuroscience stream. And there's just so much personalization that you can have, and you can take electives and other science subjects, for example, that you're interested in. I took most of my electives in CAPS, like I could take microscopic anatomy, different physiology classes, etc. And they're difficult classes, yes, but that passion and that flexibility that you get in your upper years in neuroscience really propels you through the program. So I had an absolutely amazing experience, especially in my upper years. Neuroscience only gets better. But considering how I balance all that with extracurriculars, I'd also like to say, yeah, I was always like very involved. I would take a lot on. I'm like that a lot. But the contrast how I did that in my earlier years versus in my later years, where I'd say I was much more successful, was I was dedicating my time to things that I was truly passionate about. Of course, I had to figure that out using the earlier years. In like first year, I was involved in designing this anti-cancer drug with a group, which was amazing, but I'm not sure if I'm 100% into a drug design. So I felt that wasn't 100% my thing. And because of that, and just feeling like you have a place that really impacts how you feel with an extracurricular and how tired perhaps you feel afterwards. So I was involved in a lot of extracurriculars, research clubs, physiology club, events coordinator, just kind of exploring in earlier years. Upper years still had a lot, but I was passionate about them. And with having a lot of extracurriculars, it forces you to have to be organized. As Kimia kind of mentioned already, at the beginning of each semester, I would write down all of my exams, everything into my Google Calendar. At the same time, I would also schedule in all of my self-care activities because I find it really important to put emphasis on both of those. Right now, I'm living in Denmark right now, and I've really seen the work-life balance over here, and it's really important. I want to bring that back to Canada, but keep myself busy forces me to keep organized. I remember I had one semester in third year where for some reason in all my classes, I was learning the same thing. So I didn't have much studying to do. And it made me feel a bit aimless in some ways because I was so used to having to have a tight schedule. So don't be afraid of the tight schedules. They end up benefiting you. Of course, again, study strategies. One key one that I adopted is Pomodoro Technique, which is to do with kind of like your ability to focus versus when you need to take breaks. I would do 25-minute intervals. If you've studied, then you get a 5-minute break, another 25, and you do that 4 times, then you get a long 30-minute break. I was much more productive doing that because naturally your brain will take breaks no matter what. So might as well schedule in your breaks so they don't end up being too long. So that was really helpful. Other things, considering the importance of like mental health and other activities, some of my breaks would involve running, for example, with a friend. So I would kind of combine social activity with physical health and taking a break, just considering time constraints. In terms of finances, I had a part-time job at UBC. They have a work program called Workload, where I would work 10 hours a week in my lab, which helped me finance my studies without being overly long. And it was also research, which was like a really focused extracurricular for me. So again, combining many things into one, really effective for me. And yeah, some specific study strategies that I found useful. Active learning, flashcards, 100% get into flashcards, like Quizlet or Auxi, absolutely amazing. And I would make those after every class. So when the midterm would come around, I wouldn't have studying to do. I would have already studied for my midterm. I would perform well on it because you're doing that little bit after every class. Is kind of that long-term approach. In the moment, it feels weird. It's like, why am I doing the midterms in a month? In the midterms, you've studied, everyone else is unfortunately stressed, staying up. And it feels shocking at first because you feel like you're supposed to feel like that too, but yeah, amazing. And I also made up some study strategies with learning objectives. If you're interested in specifically the study strategies, I can share the specifics. They really worked out for me. And then of course, with classes like math, physics, those are the problem solving kind of classes, where again, you just do the problems after every class, and UBC has resources physically for each class. For example, there's a chemistry resource center where you can go and there's TAs right there ready to help you with any problems you have. With math, the same thing. And it's really important with these type of classes that you come to your own answers or try your best to do so. You learn the most when you make mistakes, kind of thing. It's easy to see the answer and be like, oh, I could have got that. But in reality, on the exam, you wouldn't have that answer key that you would have been able to recognize the patterns in. But just with balancing everything, I was able to balance grades I was happy with many extracurriculars at UBC. Some key ones in my upper years were being president of one of the UBC student residences, just running the UBC Spanish Club, developing an app to detect skin diseases, giving lectures, different publications, which these are all just things I was passionate about. People ask me, but all these things just naturally bring me joy. And even volunteering at the same hospital as Kimia, actually. And it's just been a super rewarding experience, but I was able to do it through just balance, scheduling, doing little bits of thing at a time, taking advantage of my resources, and just really taking care of my mental health.
Yeah, so finally, the most important questions of the webinar. What is 3 pieces of advice that you would give to a student, a high school student like us wanting to enter neuroscience? So let's go with Kimia first. 3 pieces.
Sure. The first piece I would say, really research the program that you want to go into and be sure that you're okay with all the courses you're taking. Number 2 is like research the prereqs that you need to get into a program. A lot of people don't get promoted to second year from the first year because they're missing that one course or that one thing that they needed to have. So that also goes into the like researching aspect. And the third one is don't forget to take care of yourself. At the end of the day, if you're not healthy, if you are suffering from anything physically or mentally, you won't be able to succeed at school. And so share this with your friends, with your parents, with your counselor if you have one. It's really important that you have some time to reflect on the things you're doing and reflect, even if it's on your own, is what you're doing working for you? Are you happy with where you are? Because a lot of people graduate and they're not even sure of their degree. They're not even sure of like, why did they even do this? So I would say take some time to really, narrow down your decision and ask for help if you need it. Maya and I are here if you need like advice in terms of academics, in terms of the neuroscience program. And there are other people who are willing to help. So never be afraid to reach out. And that is something that I'm really happy that I did in my first year. I always went to office hours. I always went to ask TAs for help. So never, hesitate to go to that one office hour because you don't know about the connections you're going to make. And later on in your second and third year, that prof will be a reference for you and you can get into their lab. So really work on making those connections. And as a last thing, the Behavioral Neuroscience program at UBC is actually discontinuing and it's being replaced by the Neuroscience program. So from what I've heard from my professors, a lot of it will stay the same. The only different thing is it'll be more, science focused rather than like art and psych focused. The course codes will change from psych to like NCSI, like neuroscience or something. The professors, most of them are going to be the same. So the things I learned in my second year neuroscience course, you guys will also learn the same. However, the structure is going to be different, and there's more science requirements in your second year that you need to take. For example, you need to take a genetics course, like a bio 234, I think. So it's changing. So I would say definitely research that. If you need help, I can connect you with my professors that know more about the program. I know the program head who is, in connection with my neuroscience club. And the neuroscience club, works to educate people who want to get into a neuroscience program. Because this year, for the next academic year, are going to be the first set of people who are getting accepted into the program. So everyone's pretty new to it. So I would say definitely do your research and do the requirements because they are a bit different from what I did. And so it kind of feels weird for me to be, the last behavioral neuroscience, class to be graduating, but the neuroscience program also sounds exciting. I know lots of behavioral neuro kids are transferring to the neuroscience program because that's just more of what they want. They want a more sciencey degree rather than like an arts focused. So yeah, that's for my 3 pieces of advice.
Thank you. Thanks, Kimia. And how about you, Maya? What 3 pieces would you give us?
Yeah, thank you so much. One point kind of similar to Kimia is look for mentors early on, specifically people in positions that you'd like to be in the next couple of years. I wish that I did that a bit more, although I can still remember I had my amazing mentor in high school, neuroscience PhD, who guided me through this whole process, and some other medical doctors as mentors, but I really wish I had more of that. There was sometimes in first year where I'd be in my dorm and I felt very alone. I didn't know who to ask. And I just imagine now if the version of me now could talk to that version of Maya and just share all this information, perhaps where I would be now, considering that, even though I'm very proud of my journey as well. And I really advise for anyone to just reach out to people who've already been through the process. Another piece of advice I would say is just considering extracurriculars, notably research. Don't be afraid to get into it early, even in high school, don't burn yourself out, but all of you guys have amazing abilities, and it's important to not have to feel like you need experience in a specific field before you get into it, because in itself, thinking like that, it's a conundrum. How does anyone get into research without research experience? So don't be afraid to apply early. I was really happy to get into it after first year. I know people in first year who were in research and they absolutely loved it. It's all about like believing in yourself and putting yourself out there. A final piece of advice, this is partly specific to medicine, but it's really important to not like lose your hobbies once you get into university. For one reason, just mental health. All these things for me was like piano, doing track and field, and soccer were all really important to me. And in my earlier years at UBC, I was just like, okay, I'm at UBC now, time to focus on just UBC things. But in that, I lost so many other things that were important to me and that make me well balanced. Another important part of keeping up hobbies within a medicine context is basically with medicine applications, you talk about extracurriculars you've done, and it's really impactful if you're able to say, let's say you're in Taekwondo, you've been doing it since you were 7 and you've continued it throughout your university career. That's really powerful compared to putting like on a medical school application. You did amazing Taekwondo, but you stopped it right before university. A lot of people don't realize that you can use those activities, and I really wish I continued some of my things. So don't be afraid to continue your activities. I really advise it.
So Maya, I think you are on the process of applying to medical school. And so can you shed us some lights on the topic on, what is the process, how are you doing with it, etc.
Sure. So I'll give a little bit about my story, and then I'll share some tips with you that I wish I would have known in grade 12 or even for Kimia during my undergraduate degree. So I've applied to some medical schools. Specifically, I've been looking into University of British Columbia and University of Toronto, and I've done interviews there. My specific kind of reasons for these schools, UBC, all the reasons I told you before, I love UBC. But another thing is what's called in-province preference, where most of the people that they take into the school are people that have lived in the province before. And I think because being from Alberta, if you're interested in medicine and in Alberta, already at a very great advantage because they have a very excellent in-province process in Alberta. So you have that advantage already. And then University of Toronto is amazing to me, considering they have the hospital for sick kids over there. And I'm interested in becoming a pediatric neurologist. So there'd be excellent opportunities in Toronto in that regard. And I also love the city. But with my medical school, kind of how it works, I'll give you a bunch of details for UBC. Basically, there's a couple of components. One, you can talk about awards you've had, even awards from high school. Then there's UBC puts a lot of emphasis on being more holistic, which I love. I also like that with their undergraduate program, where you can talk about all sorts of extracurriculars you've been involved in within the realms of leadership, your ability to work with people that are different from you, your service ethic, and then just kind of diversity of experience. For example, you could write about if you've gone traveling, write about that. So you be 50% of the UBC application is based off of that. So you write all that, and then there's the MCAT for UBC. It's not weighted super highly there, but still very important. So there's that, and then there's an interview process where you kind of talk with 10 interviewers. They give you a question on a policy or a behavioral situation, and you just get to have a really fun conversation with a bunch of people. And then you kind of wait until May and you hear the decision. And Toronto is somewhat similar to that. And yeah, most of my experiences that I wrote on my application were kind of related to what I did at UBC. I also included some stuff from high school too. And it's really important about how you write your experiences on your application. That plays a major role. And just believing in yourself and being open to reapplying if you have to, considering that's kind of the situation right now in Canada. It's kind of become the norm. And yeah, so I've always known I've wanted to do medicine ever since I was 3. I would try and rescue my grandma when she was having a procedure at the hospital by bringing my doctor toys to the hospital and stuff like that. So I've always been really passionate about it. But yeah, it's just a waiting process for me right now. And tips though that I wish I knew in grade 12 and also throughout my university experience. One, of course, would be just considering the in-province kind of advantage that you can have for some schools. I mean, if you guys are you're from Alberta, there's already a very high advantage that you get for being from there. Of course, some people will go to schools in other provinces, so they have in-province in multiple places. Lots of people don't know about that. So if you're trying to debate between multiple schools that you want to do your undergrad, you can consider that. Another important thing that I really wish I knew about was for many medical schools in Canada, an important component is this kind of critical analysis section where you kind of read almost English class passages and you quickly answer questions based off of that. I wish I was just reading novels more during my undergrad to prepare me better for that, because many schools across Canada will weigh that section the highest. Some people don't realize that. And that's like yes or no if you get into a medical school. So it's a really important section to be aware of. And if you wanted to prepare for it now, I advise keep reading novels kind of thing. So that's a really important section. And what I've kind of alluded to before, keep up your activities if you can that you're involved with right now, because they really look at long-term dedication. If you want to become a physician, that's a lifetime of long-term dedication. So continue with extracurriculars that you have right now, the ones that you're passionate about. They will look on the application, but also just for yourself, if you're passionate about something, you're happy, you're able to do better in your classes. So I really wish I knew about continuing my activities. And yeah, just again, always feel free to just reach out to mentors. I've been communicating a lot with current medical students, and don't be afraid to do that. Get people to read over your application, etc. But yeah, I'm open to answering any other questions related to medicine as well.
Yeah, so thank you guys so much for all your insights throughout the meeting. And I think that's definitely questions would have to be, follow up personally. And yeah, I think that should see the end of webinar, and I will pass to Hazel for our closing speech. And thank you guys so much. Thanks to the audiences, the speakers.
Okay, so that concludes the webinar. Thanks, Nam. Thanks, Kimia and Maya. It was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for spending your time and your valuable insight on the field of neuroscience. I'm sure that every one of us have learned like a thing or two today. I find it really inspiring how you guys find out the balance between having extracurriculars and getting good grades at the same time. And essentially just putting yourself out there and like taking initiatives to just really spend, like utilize your time in university. And so as for our audience, thank you for being here as well. And we hope to see you in our upcoming webinars. Make sure to follow our Instagram to get latest updates on our Science Pathways webinar series. And so, yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening.